You are now live.
Okay, we will officially start the Eastport Forest Drive Task Force meeting. And Happy New Year, everybody. I was going to go over the overall schedule for wrapping up the task force, but first I was going to start by summarizing the results that we have so far. We have come up with 10 policy recommendations, 7 capital improvement program recommendations, and 1 operational budget recommendation. And they are spread out over the categories of the planning process, zoning and master planning, adequate public facilities and services, transit and transportation related, and adequate public facilities and services, environment, utilities, and emergency services. So where we are right now is we have posted a draft report, and I wanted to go over comments. So we have received comments from Alderwoman Pendel Charles, and I have incorporated her comments into the draft Google Doc report as of today.
Are her comments in the Google Drive?
Yes.
Oh.
So I have inserted them where I thought that they would be appropriate to insert. Claire, I had one outstanding question for you on a review comment that you made in December. I just was wondering, we were working on a recommendation and you had split it into 2 recommendations, and I actually was asking if you'd want to consider splitting it into 3.
Yeah, that would be fine with me.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure that one of them was a little bit clearer.
Yes.
So I'm if splitting into 3 will make it easier to understand, I'm all for that.
Okay. All right. I will do that. I wanted to do one more kind of summary about the different capital improvement programs and how they're interrelated, and how citizens from this sector should consider both types of capital improvement programs. But I have some questions that I just need to get resolved before finishing that piece to put into the report. I think, Sally, I had put out a question to you. One of the scoring criteria for the city was resiliency. And it said that it had the projects, did they meet the draft resilience plan? And you said that that plan is not really ready for publication, but is there any kind of description of what the city is considering as a resilience project that we could put in?
I would say, so the draft resilience plan lists all the city assets, and then it talks about risks to each of those assets. And they aren't necessarily all climate related. Or Eric, I don't know if Eric remembers this document. I don't think they're all necessarily climate. Well, at one point we weren't just focusing on climate, and then I think we decided to focus more on climate. So I think we probably should say it is climate, but pretty generally speaking. So it's kind of the things you would think, like our assets are City Dock, Hillman. What are the biggest threats to those? Sea level rise, that. So it's kind of like that. But then we also say, I know, like city infrastructure. And a lot of those risks too, a lot of them ended up being sea level rise. Like, where is the city infrastructure? Is it vulnerable to flooding? is this, so when we're scoring our CIP projects, we are looking at, does this in any way help some kind of longer term climate issue in this particular area?
Okay, I thought I had recalled earlier that in a discussion you said, and this might have been almost a year ago, that you had at one point considered expanding the definition of resiliency to being economic resiliency.
I mean, the comp plan.
I might have been talking about the comp plan.
Yeah. This, what Sally was talking about, I mean, this is something that was started before I came on board, but it is, Sally's right. I mean, it was pretty specific to a climate resilience action strategy. I mean, that's what it's called. But the comp plan's taking a much broader approach to resilience, and it's just the nature of it. We can, and we're sort of, we should be in that document. And, so economic and social resilience are definitely a part of that.
So will this broader definition, what I'm looking at is with the recommendations, especially those that are suggesting some type of capital improvement project, I'm hoping to use the terminology that's in the scoring criteria. Make sure that if there's information that citizens feel would support a higher scoring of a project against the criteria, then I'd like to make sure we bring that into our write-up as much as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense to support if you want a project to be in the CIP.
It would be strictly the climate resilience terminology, or okay.
I mean, yeah, there are other things that we score for CIP projects that are, it might be. I would say this: try to speak to all of the or as much criteria as you can in that list. Yeah. Then your bases are kind of covered.
I agree, and I do have the list. It's 8. You have 8 factors. Some are 25 points down to 10 points. The only one I didn't clearly understand was the resilience factor, because it was referencing this plan, and I had heard, so that clarifies it, that in the comp plan, you're looking at resilience in a broader sense. But the resilience plan is still talking about climate related impact to infrastructure. And that's scoring on the CIPs. Okay.
So hi, Alderwoman Pindell Charles, are her comments in pink in the draft document?
If it says that I put those in today, are they comments today?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So what I did is I took the comments and I inserted them. I mean, they need to be redone a little bit, but I just wanted to get them into the document.
Okay.
Thank you for doing such a thorough review.
Yeah, I had to wait till my grandson wasn't here to really focus on this because I can't do it with him around. He's no problem at all. It's just I needed some kind of focus time to do it. Yeah, some longevity focus time. Well, I could take a few hours without stopping. So yeah, but it turned out fine. Like I said, he's no problem, but he's still fine.
And Alderwoman, what did you mean by waiver legislation?
Which one is that? Let me see.
That is.
Where is that?
Looks like it's at the bottom of page 14.
Page 14. No, I was just quoting what Lily had in there. That's a term she used. So I don't know what that means. I mean, she'd have to explain it.
Do you see where we are, Lily?
It's
Yeah, I see.
I guess when folks are asking for waivers under the planning and zoning, that's my guess.
Like
So this is interesting. What I thought this should be added to that sentence, and then what was in quotes was special exceptions and waiver legislation. So I thought this was your language. This was not in the report. This was coming from your email recommending additional language in the report. So this is on.
You mean mine?
Yeah.
You talking about mine?
Yes.
No, I took that straight out of your report. The only part I added was what's underlined. Let me see, page 14.
Oh, okay. Okay. That was not my specific language. And I certainly would understand what special exceptions legislation. So I will try to track down where the waiver came from. I'll have to find out which group that was.
Yeah, it's on page 14.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just saying that I had incorporated everything except, so now you're on. I really haven't touched the comment about the overall description of the Annapolis Ward Civic Association concept.
Oh, okay. Now,
I was hoping Chris would get on this call, but he's not here. So.
Right, exactly. And because I didn't have the benefit of having read it before he gave his presentation the last time, I wasn't sure. Now, it sounds like that each ward is supposed to have an Annapolis Ward Civic Association, aside from whatever civic associations or community associations they already have. So my question was, this sounded like something in addition to that. And my next thought is, that's a burden on our wards, because if you come up with another organization, that means you might have more people, which means you got to find more folks to serve. So anytime you have, and then what's the impact on the original community association? I mean, do they feel some kind of way about, now we've got another association, where does that put them? And that sort of thing. And that's why I said the ability to govern, how does that impact that original community association's ability to govern? So my suggestion, and I don't know what the reasoning is behind all this, is that we would have maybe a subcommittee under an umbrella of your primary community association, and that would be your Annapolis Ward Civic Subcommittee or something like that. So that was my understanding. It sounds like he's talking about two different. If you already have one, then this is a second one. And that's, to me, a bit burdensome for any one ward. Does that make sense?
Well, it does. He's really proposing something kind of outside the box here. And,
right. And that's fine.
I was, it seemed like it might be a lot, but we didn't have a lot of comments when he presented. So I wasn't sure whether people were in agreement or not. I mean, I guess I was assuming people were in agreement because there wasn't a whole lot of discussion. I think one of the basis for his suggestion is just a concern about uh, representation, and so that all wards, all community associations are represented, and the alder persons are kind of leading that representation.
Right. Like I was questioning the same thing. We have, like, Rhonda's my Ward 3 person. So if my community had any issues, we would come to Rhonda. So
Right.
in the creation of this other entity, are the community associations to go to that entity who then goes to Rhonda? Or what exactly are the responsibilities of that task, that group, whatever they're called, you know, and how does that relate to Rhonda versus the community associations?
Yeah,
I
That
missed
sounds-
that presentation. It was probably the last, I guess it was a recent one, because I missed 2 calls. So it probably was one of those calls that I missed.
it was the last one, and I had not read this, so I didn't have the benefit of asking a question because honestly, I hadn't read what Chris had written. So I apologize for that.
So it comes out of the overall, I mean, and Bill and I talked a little bit about this morning. It comes out of the overall recommendation that we as a task force identify a different mechanism for meaningful citizen involvement. So it doesn't have to be this proposed structure that Chris came up with. It certainly, it could be something else. I think what we originally were writing towards was just a continuation of a task force similar to what we have now. I think we would ask you to go back to the city and redesignate representatives from the different wards, given where we are right now. We do have a baseline. I think representatives could see the value of participating possibly in the phase 2, maybe a little clearer than that they saw the value in participating in phase 1. Our government representatives have kind of clarified how they feel that they could get involved or should be involved in a task force of this nature. So, I mean, we could just stay with recommending kind of a phase
work
2
group
of it.
or something like that.
Millie,
Yeah.
I have a suggestion.
Yes.
Maybe if we just modify this language a little bit and just say that the task force recommends that each ward have a ward civic association, and acknowledge that if it already exists, that great, that it can serve this purpose. And if not, then we're recommending that the ward consider creating something, because then that would keep Alderwoman Pindell Charles, you know, she already has a structure and it works well. She doesn't have to have
That's
a
a
new
great
one.
idea.
And then maybe, you know, for example, in my ward, we don't necessarily have a civic association. We do have different neighborhoods and homeowners association, but it might be worth creating something for Ward 7. But again, maybe we just write it in such a way that it talks about options of how to do this, but leaving it up to each alderperson to establish what will work for them.
I think
I
you
think
said
that's
it
good,
well.
Claire, but I don't think it, sorry, Eric, but I don't think
Oh,
it
go
should
ahead.
be the alderperson who is well, that's a good question, because then who would it be? I don't know, but I just think it should be separate, something separate from the political system, but that's where my
Yeah.
idea ends. So maybe that's not realistic.
Or
so-
maybe
I mean, it doesn't have to be that specific. I mean, it could be a recommendation that this sort of system, that it's advisable or ideal for every ward to have some kind of civic entity. I mean, I felt, you know, I kind of agree with what Claire was saying, you know, that we have a situation where, you know, 3 wards of the city have a pretty established large membership organization that's pretty effective. And then the rest of the wards, the civic associations that exist are all kind of balkanized into small homeowners associations. And, so it seemed to make sense for those other wards to have something that would compare, in these contexts where you have a project that cuts across multiple wards, and but it would help to get folks in those wards more engaged. So
Would the purpose of this civic group be for the community to go to them if there's some kind of an issue with a development or what have you? Or is it more to be in the other direction, where if there's Rhonda wants to get some input from her communities, she goes to this task force and they then in turn communicate with all the community associations?
I think it could be both. I mean, I think, like, who was it Lily saying that I think his main issue or concern was how can we really make sure we're hearing from everyone?
Yeah. Right. And
So
I
I think that would go both ways.
right. And there are issues where it takes, I mean, certainly as kind of a rookie in this community involvement arena, there's a level of coming up to speed that I think it's a continual learning process for residents that want to help their communities in these processes. And so it wouldn't always be focused on a particular development project, but it could just be understand, there would be times they would meet just to understand who's doing what and the interactions. A lot of the things that we had to do as part of this task force, just so we can come up with, I hope, some meaningful recommendations. So then what he was looking at doing, and when you reread it, I hope everyone will just reread this section one more time and we'll rewrite it for review. But I think then he thought, when there is a development or an issue that does cross the different wards, you would have these groups in place, and they have some corporate knowledge. They've created a body of corporate knowledge for themselves, and then they form a task force, say, to look at the Forest Drive corridor. But there's a group that's meeting on a much more regular basis, regardless of whether there's a sector study or a large development.
How I kind of see it is, based on what everybody's kind of saying, this is an option offered to all wards. How can this all be actualized in each ward? Say, for instance, Sally and Eric want to do a presentation about some planning and zoning issue. Then they would go to a certain group or body called the Annapolis Ward Civic Association. Say it's in Ward 7. Whereas maybe in Ward 3, they would just come to the Greater Parole Community Association's executive leadership team. But there should be some designated subcommittee or committee or organization within every ward that's tapped into whatever planning and zoning issues are going on. Does that make sense?
Yes. So, and going back to Sally's comment about having the aldermen involved, I think the reason for recommending that was that it should be representative of the people that you're representing. So you want them actively involved in getting this group together and staying involved in this group.
That's true.
So that you don't say, well, where's my alderman? I mean, why isn't he or she worried about this issue, or how do I get them up to speed on this issue? They're kind of, I guess it's like the way Rob does town halls. I don't know if that's going on a regular basis or not, but that would kind of be I would see that as a component of this kind of organization. There would be kind of a regular way to touch base with your representative.
Yes, I mean, before the pandemic, Rob was really good at holding town halls on a quarterly basis. So he was connecting everyone. I don't know why I'm
And
getting.
in Ward 3, we have quarterly meetings. Greater Parole Community Association are the ones that host it. I'm invited to make comments or whatever I need to do. We've got, some parole place going on. Alan Hyatt and Stephen, his son, come and give presentations. So that's kind of our way of engaging the community when there's a project or something else going on. So everybody's kind of got their way of doing it. But the main thing is to make sure that there's some sort of back and forth. There's a connection between the community, the alderperson, and the city, I guess is the bottom line.
Yes. Agreed.
Mm-hmm. And
Okay,
something that's
I will
structured
take a
that
crack
you know.
at. I don't know why I'm getting. I'll take a crack at rewriting that section.
Okay. Did you want me to go through each one of these, Lily?
If you want to, that would be great.
Okay. Number 1, that was just a 1A, 1B thing. Number 3, the quarterly, whatever form that they take, it should be quarterly with our county and state partners, whether it's county, P&Z, DPW, DOT, state highway, since they're very necessary partners who have been at our task force table all the time. So there should be, I think, some quarterly meeting, especially in Ward 3, because we back up right at the county line, and so is Ward 7. So for those wards that back up right on another jurisdictional line, I think it's really, really important that there be some sort of quarterly, possibly meeting or some kind of connection, meeting preferably. And that might be a town hall that Rob might think every quarter, at least have a part of that meeting to be involving the county and the state. Number 4, Camille did explain to me about the Professional Community Management Inc. and the Laurel Group. And I wanted to add Annapolis Walk HOA is in Ward 4. Adding Parole Heights, which is our area behind the Honda dealership, Admiral Oaks, the Bywater Corridor, Greenbrier, Southwoods HOA, 1901 West, and Allen Apartments. So those should be added to that chart that you had on page 7. Page 8 is just my problem. Organizational charts some kind of make me real dizzy. This one made me a bit dizzy. So I just put it down and went on to the next big thing because I couldn't get it. I'm not good with that.
Well, we'll take a look at it. We'll take a look and see if we can make some changes. I have a military background, so I actually added some parts to org chart, but
Lord.
we'll try to make it a little easier to understand.
I wonder if instead of economic matters, did you mean, should it be rules and rules and government committee? Or
are you talking to me, Sally?
Or no, I guess
she's
really
talking in general. Yeah.
Flow chart. I'm not
agree.
sure.
We didn't get any comments. Again, Chris put this together. I really do wish he was here so we could ask some of those questions.
Okay.
I was a little surprised that he cited the committee economic, he did, but maybe he just, who's the chair of that?
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Of Economic Matters? No, Alderman Schandelmeyer. Alderman Finlayson's the chair of rules and
rules.
I was wondering if he just had a better relationship with the chair of that particular committee, but We
If
could take a
this,
look at what makes sense as far as the right group for that to all be tied into. So Sally, I mean, please take a look and mark it up or just send me a comment.
Okay.
And I just made a note that part of Ward 2 overlaps into 3 when it comes to Germantown, Homewood, and 3 overlaps intersects into Ward 4. Oxford Landing has 9 streets, 4 in Ward 3, and 5 of them are in Ward 4. Don't ask me how that happened. That was before my time. So, but it works fine because Alderwoman Finlayson and I work together in Oxford Landing, so we're good. Number 6 is on page 9. Yes, there should be some sort of acknowledgement / gratitude of our unprecedented partnerships, county and state, and the city as well, especially if we expect these partnerships to continue indefinitely. This is vital. So that's huge for me as a city
I actually put that on page 1.
Oh, okay. I missed it. Okay, thank you. Okay, all right.
I agree, definitely agree.
Page 7, number 7, page 14. I added, nor does it result in gentrification. That's an important item, I do believe, especially when we're talking about affordable housing. And I think Sally and Eric kind of know what I'm talking about. I sent them something about a month or so ago, but that's something that we really need to be careful about in the city, that some of the things that we do don't result in that without even knowing or recognizing that. So I wanted to make sure that was part of that. Number 8 on page 17, G should be Bywater Road and Forest Drive, and H, and I'm looking out because we're very cognizant, even though we've mentioned it before, I still want to make sure that we have the general area of Chickasaw Round Road and Forest Drive, and Aris T. Allen Boulevard, which includes Fairfax Crossing. That ties over to where Camille is, and that Fairfax Crossing is so critical at that point. Number 9, page
And
22.
I added that already. That's been added.
Good. Page 22, generally speaking, I rarely admit to use the words always and never. But I think, to me, it locks us in when we say the city should adopt the Peninsula principles. Instead, the city should adopt those Peninsula principles that are found to be beneficial and or appropriate, because some of them may not apply, some of them may not work for us. So it may be all of them that end up working for us, which is fine. But I just want to put that caveat in there that we don't lock ourselves into all of the Peninsula principles.
Yep.
Number 10, page 22. Yes, we are mostly impacted by the county. Ward 7 is as well, but we go a little bit further to the mall and all of that, but they're locked in. Ward 7 is locked in. We're locked out, I guess. They're locked in, we're locked out. Considering that we border right up on the county and the state, Forest Drive at Route 2 and West Street at Route 2. With that being said, the last sentence in the larger paragraph should read, the county and state will need to be involved to a large degree and be consistent and engage partners to all relevant conversations. And number 11, and I think this is something that Bill and I discussed and we talked about in our meeting back in August, that we understood that our city, county, and state partners cannot take an official position on this final report. However, we will allow them to provide their own documents and information that should be contained in this final report. This is critical, again, since we expect for them to be our partners indefinitely. This is vital, and I can't overstate it enough, being an elected official. And how we've all worked together this past year, I think, is indicative of and showing the necessity of having them on board with whatever we do, and including them in that report, I think, is really critical. We want to make sure that they understand that we're grateful for their participation, that all the work that they did is not in vain. I mean, it's been a long haul. They've had to give up evenings and weekends, I'm sure, to help us out. And so it should be well noted. So that was it for me.
Okay, I think these were great. And I did take a crack at that last one in page 3. I actually moved it up, but it's definitely needs edits. So I think if there's no more, so there's a couple areas that I'm gonna to do a little more work on for the final draft. And are there any other edits that people wanted to add tonight?
Camille, did you have anything to add to Ward 3?
I just had some questions. I didn't really have anything to add. Just clarification, really, because I did miss the presentation that Chris did, I guess. But
and Chris is on now. Welcome, Chris.
With the
Hello.
with the ward civic, again, the civic associations, the ward groups that you're talking about, and if it is adopted that those CBAs, I guess, those community benefit agreements, what role does the civic association have with regards to a CBA? If, you know, if they're going to have some kind of an agreement, is it directly with each community association, or would it be with the ward civic group? I think there needs to be further clarification. I'm just a little concerned that there needs to be a streamline as to the order of, you know, who goes to who or who works with who. And so it's just a little foggy yet as to what we're really recommending and the role that each plays. You know, I don't know how communities would feel. I don't know how community associations would feel about somebody speaking on their behalf, unless they had approval that it was okay to do that. So I'm just a little unclear, that's all. That was really about it. I didn't have anything else.
So if I can respond to that, I think that's a valid point, and we can do some clarification. The intent was that the ward civic associations would be made up of an equitable array of communities represented in that particular ward. And somebody will have to be identified in that ward civic association as the chair or the lead for that particular development program, and that would probably be the person that would sign on behalf of the community on the CBAs. But you're right, we could probably do some additional edits to the document to kind of clarify that. But we didn't really want to, you know, make anything too concrete because this is kind of new ground, and I'm not quite sure how we really want to approach it. So I take your point, well taken, and I solicit any clarification on the edits to make it more clear.
Chris,
Thank you, Chris.
I did get some comments before you jumped on, so I will get with you either later this week or early next week, and maybe we'll do one more round of edits on this particular recommendation.
Yeah, that'd be fine, no problem.
Thank you so much, Chris. Yeah, I was a concern because we don't want to overburden communities with another association or group because that involves more people that you have to find to be a part of it. Within the Greater Parole Community Association, we have about 4 or 5 different subcommittees. One is the Balanced and Managed Growth and Development Committee. That would be the one that spearheads meeting with Sally and Eric and making some determinations initially to pass on to the executive leadership team and to the entire body. So in Ward 7, like Claire said, they have several different, which we do too, different organizations. So they may want to set theirs up a bit differently. So I think it's going to be incumbent upon each ward to kind of make a determination what works best for them. So, but thank you. This is definitely out of the box, but I like the idea. I think it's great to focus on those planning and zoning issues, making sure that we have someone, some organization in that ward that's going to be responsible for making those connections. But thank you so much.
Well, that's specifically why I really want to see this under each ward alderperson, because that alderperson knows their ward the best, and they know how to best get representation from their communities concerning those development programs. So I think this is all workable. We just need to kind of figure out how to make it more clean for everybody else to understand.
I would just caution one thing, just have the alderperson be a part of whatever the selection is, not necessarily be the head of it. Then you run into some kind of constituent issues. So as long as they're part of the discussion and part of the selection and how it's all brought together, that's fine. But maybe not necessarily being in charge of it. Then we run into it may be a little more problematic.
Understood, and we can work that.
I think that's
Yeah,
a great
absolutely.
solution, doing it that way.
Yeah. The other thing I want to mention now, and I see we have Martha and Michelle on, we have our county and state representative. Just want to make sure that's what the discussion was, as far as them submitting some sort of report based on either how they, helped us, assisted us, whatever they want to write to put in that report for me will be acceptable. That's their call. But thank you all, Martha and Michelle. Thank you so much.
I think we've already done that. I sent that out.
Yeah, I kind of referenced that document when I introduced that section. So if you could look at what I put in the Google Docs today, and Sally, I have to pull that discussion. What would you call that for as an attachment? Was that necessarily a position paper, or?
It was just what Alderwoman just said. It was just kind of a description of our participation. And I don't know, Michelle or Martha, do you?
Yeah, it provides basically the guidance, because I don't want to, we have a mutual agreement of understanding between all the agencies in terms of what our participation is for this group. And so therefore, that was the language that was pulled out so that, so to be included in the report, because what happened, again, as Alderman Pendel Charles mentioned, we don't have an authority for the groups for the jurisdictions that we represent, but we are part of staff for this group in terms of providing information that is needed to make decisions for this task group. So if you use the documentation that Sally provided in its entirety, it should be very clear in terms of what was done by the jurisdictions, what the contribution was, and basically it provides the verbiage that was requested in terms of stating that we were not a voting entity for the final report recommendations that's coming out, which is going to be very vital because, again, this is a recommendation coming from the task group, but we are staff. And so therefore it has to be clear cut in terms of what our role has been and how we move forward.
Martha and Michelle, have you all written what you just indicated? Okay, yes. Good.
Yes, really we authored that together as a group.
Yeah, and good. I think that was very helpful.
Good. You might want to call it a technical support report, technical support, because they provided us technical support. So maybe a technical support position paper or something to do with technical support, because that's, in my mind, that's what they provided.
Okay. So, all right. So what we have left to do, I think, is do a final overall edit of the report. And I am looking for volunteers for that editing team. And then I was hoping to do that next week, do a final kind of edit of the report, and then send the document out for task force review the weeks of January 25th and February 1st, and then have a final meeting on Tuesday, February 9th to approve the final report.
Lily, I have a question with that.
Yes.
In us presenting this document, what are we looking for after we've presented this? Are we looking for input then from the General Assembly as to whether they approve, don't approve, like this, want more information on that? Is that what would be the next step? That's what we're looking for once we've given this, that report?
I guess that's open for discussion. We could say one of our recommendations is that a version of this task force be reinstated to work with Eric as the comp plan gets developed and to oversee implementation of the recommendations, because some of the recommendations need coordination with county programming cycles or county CIP programming cycles. So there's various cycles, and this would become an advocacy group at some level for the recommendations, as well as possibly informational support group to Eric as he's putting the Forest Drive sector study into the comp plan. And it could also be a valuable group for the county is working on their general development plan right now with the small area planning starting, and it could be another, there's involvement for the next version of this task force in several areas. As far as what this particular group, I think this would be the end where we do a final report and create the next task force, and that task force would come up with their own goals and objectives. But I think really our objective was to come up with this report and look at the sector study, look at the recommendations, and clarify what was most important to the citizens.
Yeah, I think what we did was initially way back in the spring, we were talking about giving them an update, and then we never actually did an update. So this is
right.
more or less become our final report, our final recommendation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just didn't probably have anything at the point of having an update, and knowing the schedule that Eric has on his comp plan and the schedule that the county has on their general development plan, I think how we could be most useful is really just to kind of end this group and kind of restart another group where if there are some, I mean, it's clear from COVID, the scheduling that we have right now does not work for some of the representatives that were originally assigned the task force, and maybe there'd be other representatives for those wards that could get more involved in the next iteration. The alder persons might have ideas of people. So I don't know, anybody have any other ideas on that? What would come after this presentation?
Based on just everything, thinking through everything and seeing how it's gonna flow over to the city council, I'm looking at a couple of things. Number one, the integration into the comp plan and what is useful and what can be established from this report that can flow and integrate into the comp plan. That's I think number one. Number two, an ongoing organization group that works with planning and zoning in their particular wards, and that goes back to Chris's suggestion. I think there needs to be something ongoing and concrete in every ward that speaks to planning and zoning issues. Number 3, I really like the community benefits agreement suggestion. I think that's huge. That's something we've done in Ward 3 on a more not formalized basis, but more of a verbal kind of basis. So I think that's helpful. And number 4, and I can't overemphasize it enough, what partnerships we have established with our county and state. To me, that is huge. I mean, this is something that should have happened years ago, but you know, better late than never. But for me, those are the 4 things that I see that going forward with this. And I'll even go so far as to say maybe whatever organization or structure that is set up in every ward, maybe that group should maybe provide some sort of, I won't say report, update to the council, maybe yearly, just to kind of let the council know, because I may not know what's going on in Ward 6, but if I hear it in a council meeting in a concise report, that might be really helpful to say, oh, we've got that same issue. And that's how all this came about, Ward 8 and Ward 3 working together. Yeah. We found out we had mutual interests. And so it worked out, it has worked out very well. The coalition, I think, has done extremely well. So for me, that's kind of what I see, maybe a yearly report and that kind of binds us together, because we had talked about, and John knows, we had talked about a while ago in the coalition about even forming some sort of wards-wide organization to work on. We talked about beautification projects. We talked about different things, and Lily remembers that as well. So yeah, this might be a way of kind of coalescing our wards. And so that's kind of what I see going forward and the purpose of this. This to me has been huge, this undertaking. It has taken a while, but any good thing takes a while, oftentimes. But it has been extraordinarily beneficial. And everybody has worked, I think, very well together. Like you said, virtual is tough to work with. Having to report to a place for a meeting oftentimes makes us get out of our chairs and move a bit. But at least for me. But anyway, so that might be some suggestions. But that's kind of how I see it.
Okay.
Okay, so we are looking at, I talked to Julian, and the date of February 9th, Tuesday, February 9th at 6 p.m. is open. If that works for the majority of us, we'll set that as the date of our final meeting and look at sending out a review document Monday, January 25th for kind of a 2-week review. Does anyone have any time to be on an editing team?
You're just talking about, like, you know, typographical errors and grammars and stuff like that.
Yeah, a little bit of wording, maybe a tiny bit of reformatting. Can I sign you up, Camille?
Just, you can give me a piece of it.
Okay.
No, you can send me part of that also.
Okay, great.
I do have another question.
I'm great at finding strange commas and cloudy phrases.
There, good.
Are we, as the task force, will our names be listed on here as the people that put this together? Or, and I guess, will it be everybody from the very beginning, regardless of whether they, you know, were involved or not? I guess.
I mean, yes. My goal is to reach back out to everybody when we do have a draft document. There are some, you know, like Juwan, I've kept in touch with, Brooks, there are some folks that just couldn't make the way that the schedule happened after COVID, but have been supportive of all of our recommendations. So we might have some folks from earlier meetings that would want to be supportive. I mean, everybody was assigned the task group. They're all getting the emails. I will reach out to everybody. We'll see what they say. I mean, they were on the task force and this is
going
the
on for
product.
over a year, so that's kind of tough. It's been going
I
on for
know,
over
it
a
has
year.
been. It absolutely has been.
Doesn't
Yeah.
it? Mhm.
Honestly, for the community representatives that didn't move into positions where they didn't feel like they could participate, and I was thinking of Ben and Brooks, we had a pretty good unit of citizens that stayed together on this. And I know, once we established the role of our government representatives, it just seemed like we did end up with a pretty good core. That was, I mean, Chris has been very involved and he's at Ward 2, which I really liked. Claire is 7 and 3. I mean, I think we got a good spread down Forest Drive and Eastport. So
Hey, Lily, is Chris.
yeah.
Going back to Alderwoman's last comment about should we consider maybe asking that the city council kind of reappoint the task force to be that enterprise ward group that can kind of work with planning and zoning, and part of its tasking would be to work with the individual wards to kind of facilitate the recommendation of establishing these ward community groups and kind of act as a Kickstarter program capability.
Great suggestion. That brings them back into the fold, Chris.
Yeah, I'm going to the point you made as well as what Lily just said. You got a core group of people working right now very well together, but we kind of need endorsement by the city council to extend that further. And instead of just keeping the task force alive on the Forest Drive, why not convert it to an enterprise, ward capability to act as a Kickstarter program for the other wards to start participating into this, suggestion of having ward civic groups. And after a while, maybe we disband because we're no longer needed. But the objective would be getting all these ward groups established and actually functioning with the planning and zoning development programs.
I think that's a great
Great
idea.
suggestion. Yep. That
All
can
right.
go on the recommendation. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I'll work with you on that, Lily, later on in the week. We'll get together and chat.
Okay. Thank you. Well, that was, I feel, a very productive meeting. We just went over our hour, so I think there are some assignments, and look for a draft, an updated draft in the Google Documents the week of January 25th.
Okay.
Sounds great. Thank you, Lily.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank you
evening,
all